I walked into divorce court already knowing I was about to lose everything. The house I helped build from nothing. The savings I protected through sleepless nights. Even the future I once believed my marriage guaranteed. Across the room, my cheating husband sat calmly, dressed in confidence, already acting like a winner. His lawyer stacked documents neatly on the table. His family sat behind him, whispering, smiling, certain this was just a formality before he took it all. I felt hollow but not surprised. This wasn't just a divorce. It was an execution, and I was expected to surrender quietly. Then my mom leaned toward me and whispered 6 words that made my heart stop. "Give him everything. Don't fight." I stared at her, certain she'd lost her mind. Everything meant the house, the money, the business, my dignity. When the judge asked for my response, I nodded and said yes. My husband laughed out loud in court. He had no idea that by the end of this, his victory would be the very thing that destroyed him. My name is Charlotte, and for a long time, I thought my marriage was solid simply because it looked that way from the outside. 12 years. That was how long I had been married to Ryan. 12 years of shared routines, shared plans, shared silence. People called us stable. They said we were lucky. They said we'd made it. What they didn't see was how quietly things had shifted. Ryan liked to tell people he was the provider, the visionary. And in public, he played that role perfectly charming smile, confident handshake, the man who always had a plan. But behind closed doors, our life ran on lists I made, budgets I balanced, and worries I carried alone. I was the one who stayed up at midnight checking our accounts, making sure the numbers still worked. I was the one who postponed my own promotions, because Ryan said his career was at a critical stage. Every time I hesitated, he would take my hands and say, "Just a little longer, Char. We're building something." So I waited. And I believed him. At first, the changes were easy to excuse. He came home later. He answered emails during dinner. He stopped asking how my day was, but I told myself that was just stress. Marriage, everyone said, wasn't supposed to feel exciting all the time. Then the phone became a wall between us. Ryan used to leave it lying around. Now it never left his hand. The screen would go dark the moment I walked into the room. If I asked who he was texting, he'd smile casually and say, "Work stuff. You worry too much." I hated that sentence. It made me feel small for noticing things. There were nights we sat on the same couch, inches apart, watching TV in silence. I would talk about my day, about my concerns, about how distant we felt. Ryan would nod without really listening, his attention drifting elsewhere. Once, I asked him softly, "Do you still feel like we're a team?" He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "Charlotte, why do you always turn everything into a problem?" That was when I stopped asking. Still, I didn't suspect betrayal right away. I suspected loneliness. I thought we were just fading. I told myself that if I worked harder, if I was more patient, more understanding, things would settle again. I didn't know I was already being replaced. The first crack came one evening when I arrived home early with a headache. The house was quiet, lights dim. As I walked down the hallway, I heard Ryan's voice from the kitchen, low, warm, almost unfamiliar. He was laughing. Not the polite laugh he used with colleagues. Not the forced laugh he gave me lately. This one was softer, intimate, like it belonged to a different version of him. I stopped walking. "I miss you too," he said into the phone. My heart dropped. When I stepped into the kitchen, he turned, startled. The call ended instantly. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't even hesitate, just a client. Too fast, too smooth. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying that laugh in my head. Something inside me shifted not into anger, but into clarity, a quiet, painful awareness that I had been trusting a man who was already somewhere else. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know the truth first. And once I saw it, there would be no way back. I didn't become suspicious overnight. Suspicion grew slowly, like a bruise you don't notice until it hurts to touch. After that night in the kitchen, I started paying attention, not in a dramatic way, not snooping or accusing, just watching. I noticed patterns I had ignored before. Ryan's late meetings always landed on the same days. His phone never left his pocket, even in the shower. When it buzzed, his eyes would flick down immediately, sharp and alert. like someone guarding a secret. I told myself I was imagining things. But imagination doesn't explain perfume that isn't yours. One morning, as Ryan rushed past me to grab his keys, I caught a scent on his jacket, soft, floral, unfamiliar. It didn't belong to me. I stood there long after he left, holding the fabric in my hands, my chest tight. When I asked him about it later, he didn't even look up from his laptop. "Probably someone at the office," he said. "You're reading too much into it." I nodded, swallowing the questions burning my throat. The truth finally cornered me on a Tuesday afternoon. I had left work early because of a splitting headache and decided to drive home a different way, just to clear my head. Traffic slowed near a cafe close to Ryan's office, a place he had once told me he never had time for. That's when I saw him. Ryan was sitting by the window, relaxed, leaning forward. Across from him sat a woman I had never seen before. She laughed and touched his arm, and he didn't pull away. He smiled at her openly. Easily the smile I hadn't seen in months. I parked across the street and watched. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. At one point, Ryan reached across the table and brushed her hand with his thumb, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I waited until they stood up, until I watched him walk her to the door, until he kissed her cheek, lingering just a second too long. That second changed everything. I drove home in silence, my mind painfully clear. There was no denial left, no explanation that could soften what I had seen. The man I had trusted with my life was sharing himself with someone else, without guilt, without fear. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I set the table like always. We ate dinner in quiet, the sound of silverware unnaturally loud. Afterward, I looked at him and said calmly, "Who is she?" Ryan froze. Then he exhaled, leaned back in his chair, and said something I will never forget. "So, you finally noticed." I felt my chest tighten. "How long?" I asked. He shrugged. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said. My voice shook despite my effort. "It matters to me." He rubbed his temples, irritated, not ashamed. "Her name is Amanda," he said. "It's been a few months." A few months. I stared at him, waiting for remorse, an apology, something. Instead, he said, "I didn't plan for this to happen. But it did. And honestly, Charlotte, I haven't been happy for a long time." The words hit harder than the betrayal itself. "So, cheating was your solution?" I asked. He stood up, suddenly defensive. "You're always tense, always worried. Everything with you feels like pressure. Amanda makes me feel understood." Understood. I laughed then, a short, broken sound that surprised even me. "I built my life around you," I said. "I supported you. I stayed. And I appreciate that," he replied quickly. "But appreciation isn't the same as love." 2 weeks later, he told me he wanted a divorce. Not gently, not carefully. He slid a folder across the table and said, "My lawyer says it'll go smoother if we don't drag this out." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about leaving me. Ryan wasn't walking away. He was preparing to take everything with him. The word divorce sounded clean when Ryan said it, almost polite. But what followed was anything but. A week after he asked for the divorce, I received an email from his lawyer. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't cruel. It was efficient, clinical, and terrifying in its confidence. They weren't asking to separate our lives. They were preparing to erase mine. According to the proposal, Ryan wanted the house because his parents had helped with the initial down payment. He wanted control of our shared savings because, on paper, his income had been higher in recent years. And the company, the consulting firm we had built together, was described as his professional asset, since he was the public face. I read the document 3 times, my hands growing colder each time. This wasn't about fairness. This was about power. When I confronted Ryan that night, he didn't deny any of it. He didn't soften the blow. "That's just how it works," he said calmly. "I'm the one bringing in clients now. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I stared at him, barely recognizing the man I had once trusted. "So you cheat," I said quietly. "And then you take everything?" He shrugged, pouring himself a drink. "I'm just being realistic, Charlotte. Fighting will only make this uglier and more expensive for you. For me." That was when I understood something painfully clear. Ryan wasn't leaving the marriage broken or confused. He was leaving with a strategy. His parents didn't hide their approval. At dinner one evening, his mother leaned toward me and said, "You're still young. Starting over won't be so bad. Starting over with nothing." The days leading up to court felt unreal. I met with my lawyer, went through financial statements, tried to make sense of what was happening. On paper, I had arguments, I had contributions, I had years of proof. But Ryan had confidence. And confidence is persuasive. The night before the hearing, I sat alone at my kitchen table long after midnight. The house felt unfamiliar, like it already belonged to someone else. I ran my fingers over the wood, thinking about the dinners we shared, the plans we made, the future we promised each other. All of it was being reduced to numbers and signatures. That was when my mom called. I hadn't told her everything yet. I didn't want her to worry. But she heard the exhaustion in my voice immediately. "Come over," she said gently. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." I drove to her house in silence. Evelyn didn't interrupt when I finally told her everything. The affair, the divorce, the demands. She listened the way she always had. Quietly, fully, without judgment. When I finished, I waited for her to tell me to fight, to stand my ground, to protect myself. Instead, she said something unexpected. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the most dangerous thing you can do is hold on too tightly." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She met my eyes, calm and unwavering. "It means you don't win every battle by pushing back." I didn't understand her yet. Not really. But as I drove home that night, one thought kept repeating in my head. What if this wasn't about winning the divorce, but surviving what came after? By the time morning came, I was exhausted, scared, and standing at the edge of a decision that would make no sense to anyone else. And I still had no idea how much my mom already knew, or how carefully she was watching the board before making her move. Divorce court was colder than I imagined, not in temperature, but in feeling. The room was quiet in a way that made every sound feel amplified. The shuffle of papers, the scrape of chairs, the steady, indifferent ticking of the clock on the wall. I sat at the table with my lawyer, hands folded so tightly in my lap my fingers had gone numb. Across from me, Ryan looked relaxed. He wore a tailored suit, the kind I used to help him choose before important meetings. His posture was straight, confident, like a man stepping into a negotiation he already knew the outcome of. His lawyer spoke in calm, measured tones, laying out their requests one by one as if reading from a checklist. The house, the savings, the company. Each word felt like another door closing. I glanced at my lawyer. He leaned in and whispered, "We can contest this. You have grounds." I swallowed and nodded, but my chest felt tight. Fighting meant months, maybe years of hearings, fees, public scrutiny. It meant being dragged through every private detail of my marriage, while Ryan smiled and waited me out. Then I felt my mom's hand rest lightly on my arm. She leaned close, her voice barely audible. "Give him everything." I turned to her, stunned. "Mom," I whispered urgently, "this is my life." She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just looked at me and said, "Trust me, not because you understand, but because I do." The judge asked how I wished to proceed. The room held its breath. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling despite my effort to stay composed. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady but distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I accept the terms. I am did it me never." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ryan turned sharply toward me. For a split second, confusion crossed his face. Then it melted into something else, relief, followed quickly by triumph. His lawyer blinked, clearly surprised. "You're certain?" the judge asked. "Yes," I replied. "I am." I signed the documents one by one. Each signature felt heavy, final. With every stroke of the pen, I felt pieces of my old life slipping away, memories, effort, years of belief. When I finished, Ryan let out a short laugh he didn't bother to hide. He leaned toward me and whispered, "You should have fought harder, Charlotte." I looked at him calmly. "I am," I said. He didn't understand. Not then. As the judge prepared to conclude the session, I sat back down, my heart pounding not with regret but with a strange, quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, the choice was mine. Around us, people whispered. Some pitied me. Some clearly thought I was weak. Ryan smiled like a man who believed the story was over. He had no idea that this was only the end of the beginning, and that by taking everything I gave him, he had just stepped into a trap he couldn't see. The judge was already gathering her papers when my mom stood up. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "may I speak before the court adjourns?" The room stilled. Ryan's smile widened, amused, as if this were an awkward attempt at drama. His lawyer frowned slightly, but said nothing. I felt my pulse quicken, not from fear, but from anticipation. My mom hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't rushed. She looked exactly as she always did when she knew something others didn't. The judge nodded. "You may." My mom stepped forward, her posture straight, her hands steady. "My name is Evelyn Parker," she began. "I'm Charlotte's mother." Ryan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, wearing the expression of a man indulging a harmless interruption. "I'd like to clarify a matter that may be relevant to the assumptions made today," my mom continued. "Specifically, regarding my daughter's financial position after this divorce." Ryan let out a quiet laugh. I could hear it. Everyone could. My mom didn't look at him. "For over 2 decades," she said, "I have managed a private family trust established by my late husband." Ryan's laughter faltered just slightly. "The trust," she continued, "is currently valued at approximately $18 million. The air changed. You could feel it, like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. Whispers rippled across the courtroom. Chairs shifted. Even the judge straightened. Ryan laughed again, louder this time, but it sounded forced. "That's absurd," he said. "This is a divorce hearing, not a fairy tale." My mom remained calm. "The trust was created long before Charlotte's marriage," she said evenly. "It was never marital property, and until today, my daughter was not required to disclose it." Ryan's lawyer sat forward abruptly. "Your Honor," he said, voice tight, "we request documentation." My mom reached into her bag and placed a neatly organized folder on the table, already prepared. The silence that followed was unbearable. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, one page, then another. Her expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened. Ryan's smile began to slip. "This doesn't mean anything," he said quickly, turning toward his lawyer. "She's bluffing. She has to be." But his lawyer wasn't looking at him anymore. He was staring at the paperwork. My mom spoke again, her voice softer now but more dangerous. "Because Charlotte has just legally relinquished all marital assets," she said. "There is no overlap, no claim, no exposure. What belongs to her remains hers." Ryan stood up so suddenly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "You can't be serious," he said, pointing at me. "You let me take everything knowing this?" I met his eyes. For the first time in months, I felt calm. "You wanted everything," I said quietly. "So I gave it to you." His face drained of color. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Miller," she said firmly, "please sit down." Ryan didn't move. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his confidence unraveling in real time. "This changes things," he said desperately. "We need time. This wasn't disclosed." "The law does not require disclosure of non-marital assets under these circumstances," the judge replied, "especially when no claim was made against them." Ryan turned to his lawyer, panic now unmistakable. "You said she had nothing," he whispered. His lawyer said nothing. The realization hit him all at once. He hadn't won. He had taken the wrong prize. The house he fought for was suddenly a burden. The business he claimed now stood alone, unsupported. The money he grabbed was finite. And I, silent, compliant, underestimated, had walked out untouched. My mom closed the folder and turned toward me. "Come," she said gently. "We're done here." As we walked toward the exit, Ryan called my name. "Charlotte, wait." I didn't. Behind me, I heard his voice crack, not in anger, not in rage, but in something closer to fear. The courtroom doors closed. And with them, the world he thought he'd secured began to collapse piece by piece under the weight of a victory he never truly understood. Ryan didn't fall apart all at once. At first, he acted like nothing had changed. He moved into the house with exaggerated confidence, throwing a small gathering just weeks after the divorce was finalized. Mutual friends told me he laughed loudly, poured expensive drinks, and talked about new beginnings. He wanted the world to believe he had won cleanly and completely, but beneath that performance, cracks were already spreading. The consulting firm he took so proudly depended on more than his name. What Ryan never understood was that I had been the one holding the structure together, the contracts, the compliance, the long-term planning. Within months, key clients started asking questions. Investors hesitated. A few quietly walked away. Ryan called me one night, voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't tell them you were leaving," he accused. "I didn't have to," I replied calmly. "They asked?" I answered honestly. Silence followed. Then the house began to drain him. Maintenance costs piled up. Property taxes rose. The lifestyle he had fought for demanded constant feeding, and without steady growth, the money he took started shrinking faster than he expected. Amanda didn't stay long. The charm that drew her in had been fueled by confidence and excess. When those faded, so did her patience. She left quietly, without drama, taking nothing but her silence with her. Ryan spiraled after that. He sent messages late at night, first polite, then angry, then desperate. "You planned this. You tricked me. You owe me." I never replied. Legally, there was nothing he could do. The court had spoken. The trust was untouchable. Every door he tried was already closed. Within a year, rumors became headlines. Ryan filed for financial restructuring. The company downsized. The house went on the market. The man who once sat across from me in court, laughing, began avoiding public spaces where people might recognize him. I didn't feel triumph. I felt distance. My life, meanwhile, grew quieter and stronger. I invested carefully, using advisors my mother trusted. I rebuilt slowly, intentionally, without spectacle. I moved into a modest home with sunlight in the mornings and silence at night. For the first time in years, my peace didn't feel borrowed or conditional. One afternoon, nearly 2 years later, I ran into Ryan at a grocery store. He looked thinner, older. He stared at me like he wasn't sure I was real. "Charlotte," he said softly. "You look..." "Well, I am," I replied. He hesitated, then said, "I didn't know. About the trust, about what you had." I met his eyes. "You never asked," I said. "You only took." His shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked like the man I once loved, tired, uncertain, human. "I lost everything," he said quietly. I nodded, not unkindly. "No," I said. "You lost what you chose to gamble." I paid for my groceries and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air felt lighter. Ryan's world had fallen apart not because I pushed it, but because it was built on taking more than he deserved. And for the first time since the divorce, I understood something clearly. Letting go hadn't made me weak. It had made me free. After Ryan faded out of my life, something unexpected happened. Nothing dramatic, no sudden applause, no moment where the world stopped to acknowledge what I'd survived. Life simply went on. And for the first time in years, that felt like a gift. I stopped measuring my days by survival. I stopped waking up with my chest tight, bracing for the next conflict, the next disappointment. My mornings became quiet coffee by the window, sunlight spilling across the floor, the kind of calm I didn't realize I had been craving. I worked, but differently now. Not out of fear. Not to prove anything. I chose projects carefully. I turned down offers that felt wrong, even if they paid well. I surrounded myself with people who asked questions instead of making demands, who listened instead of assuming. My mom watched me rebuild with quiet pride. One evening, as we sat on my small porch, she said, "You're lighter." I smiled. "I feel lighter." She nodded, as if that had always been the goal. There were moments when memories crept in Ryan's voice, our old routines, the life I thought I'd have. Sometimes they arrived unexpectedly, like a song in a grocery store or a familiar street I passed without thinking. But the memories no longer hurt the way they used to. They felt finished. One afternoon, a former colleague asked me if I regretted not fighting harder in court. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No," I said honestly. "If I had fought, I would have stayed tied to him longer. I would have lost myself trying to win." Walking away had cost me things, but it had saved something far more important. My clarity, my dignity, my future. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen when something felt wrong, to believe that peace wasn't boring, it was earned. I even laughed more. Real laughter. The kind that surprised me when it came out. One night, as I locked up my house before bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different, not younger, not older, but steadier. Like someone who had been tested and didn't break. Ryan was no longer the center of my story. He was just a chapter. And for the first time, I was excited to see what the next page would bring without fear, without apology, and without ever having to give myself away again. For a long time, I believed strength meant holding on, holding the marriage together, holding my family intact, holding my ground no matter how much it hurt. I thought letting go meant failure. I was wrong. What I learned slowly, painfully, is that real strength is knowing when something is no longer worthy of your fight. It's understanding that not every battle is meant to be won loudly, and not every victory looks like standing your ground. Sometimes, victory is walking away intact. My mom never told me to give up my life. She taught me how to protect it. She saw what I couldn't see yet, that Ryan wasn't fighting for love or fairness. He was fighting to take. And when you're dealing with someone like that, the most dangerous thing you can do is stay within reach. By giving him everything he demanded, I took away the one thing he depended on most: control. I didn't destroy his world. He did, by building it on entitlement, shortcuts, and betrayal. All I did was step aside and let the truth catch up. Today, my life isn't flashy. It's not built on proving anyone wrong. It's built on calm mornings, honest work, and the quiet confidence of knowing I can stand on my own without shrinking myself for anyone else. I trust myself now. I listen when something feels wrong. I no longer mistake sacrifice for love. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening to my story understands, it's this: you don't lose by walking away from someone who never truly stood with you. You don't lose by choosing peace over pride. And you don't lose by trusting the people who love you enough to see the bigger picture when you can't. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is sign the papers, close the door, and step into a life that no longer requires you to give everything just to be allowed to stay. That was the moment my real life began.